Wanted to start off by saying congratulations on this amazing film. I had the chance of being able to go and see it the other day at Backlot, and it absolutely blew me away. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you so much.
So Philippa, how did you become involved with this project? Because this is a concert that unfortunately I never got to, but I know people who did attend the concert in Melbourne,
Yeah.
and they said it
Oh,
was a
wow. Great.
magical night. So how did you become involved with this project?
Okay, I was running a production company and I was actually financing a film, feature film, Jindabyne by Ray Lawrence. And that's what I was doing at that particular moment in time. And Patrick Nolan, who's the concert director that you see in the film, who was the director of Kuratunga, is a friend of mine and approached me and said, I am working with this concert and we haven't started rehearsals yet and I think it's going to be something very special. Archie and Ruby, and I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's just document it. So we did, and that was my initial contact. So we shot 3 days of them rehearsing. We spent a day with Patrick talking to Archie and Ruby in a hotel room in St Kilda, and then we filmed the opening night at the Melbourne International Arts Festival, which was sold out and a big. I mean, I was there. It was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it was. It looks absolutely amazing, and the idea about the documentary, what sparked the idea to bring that to screens now?
Um, okay, so obviously that was filmed back in 2004, and as goes the way of a lot of films, it just didn't happen then. And I came back to it. I had just come back. I was in New York on a fellowship, a filmmaking fellowship, and I came back, and I had this film in my head that I wanted to revisit that footage and make something. And I was actually going to be doing an American film, and then that fell over because of COVID. So I left in December 2019, arrived back in January, and thought, great, I can just devote myself to the Archie and Ruby film. The interesting thing was I couldn't see the footage because it had been filmed on, it wasn't filmed on film. It was absolutely archaic technology now called mini DV and digital Betacam. So I had to get funding even in order to see what I had. But before that, I approached Archie, asked his permission, and asked him to be involved as a producer and Ruby Hunter's family. So yeah, I came back to it and basically I looked at that footage and thought it struck me as being a love story first and foremost, a love story between them and the music, but also a love story about country. And I thought the thing that was missing from that footage that we originally shot was country, and Ruby's country, Narundjeri country. So I had a relationship with her brothers, Eric Richards and Jeff Hunter, and went to South Australia with very brilliant cinematographer Bonnie Elliott, and we shot what you see, which is the landscape, and I wanted the landscape and the love story and the music to really sit in balance with each other, so that it's not like inserts of country, that it very much it's part of the feeling, the emotion, the memory, the sensibilities of Archie and Ruby.
How difficult was that to line that up? Because that is one of the things I thought made this documentary so powerful. I grew up next to a river in Tasmania, and your footage was taking me back to my own childhood when I was watching it as well. So how difficult was that to match the music with the shots that you had of country? Because it looked amazing.
That was the hardest part of the editing process. I worked with two editors. I worked with Matthias Boller, who did a superb job with the music moving from rehearsal to the concert. And then I worked with a very talented editor. I mean, they're both extraordinarily talented, and both in their 20s, and it was their first feature. So, I mean, both of them did an extraordinary job. And Lily Davis, who I worked with the landscape. And the thing was that because we had the music all sorted and the interviews sorted, but at the same time finding the rhythm that made the landscape integral to the music and the emotion was the hard part. And I sort of made the quite brave decision to just go, we're going to go slow. We're just going to let people roll into this. And the whole idea from the very beginning was the idea of flow. So really that in terms of an editorial principle, in terms of structure, it was all about flow. So anything that jarred, anything that it was like no, because it would take the audience out. And as Paul Grabowski says in the film, that the way that Archie and Ruby sing, there's this riverine quality that they just sort of flow from one thing to the next in terms of the music. So I was cinematically trying to work with that idea.
Even the amazing shots that you were able to capture. I'm a huge fan of Ken Duncan, the photographer, and the way he captures the Australian landscape is so unique, and you seem to have captured the landscape in a very similar style to him. How difficult was it to get those absolutely beautiful shots?
I'm not familiar with his work, which to my great shame. Look, Bonnie Elliott is pretty amazing, and the interesting thing is my starting point was quite a painterly one. I mean, you grew up in Tasmania. I grew up. My early childhood was in Western Australia. I've always had a very, I'm a photographer as well. I've spent a lot of time photographing country, but at the same time, Bonnie was just an absolute, sister in creative, I guess, viewpoint. And I said, I don't want any mid shots. I want to be really close and in there and sort of almost within the river and within the light. And then I want the majesty of the landscape, because quite often when you're shooting the Australian landscape, it's so vast that you don't capture it. It's very hard to capture. So I think we just went off in terms of framing. I mean, we did work with drones, obviously, because, and the fascinating thing about that was, I mean, Bonnie is wading into rivers. She's a brave and courageous cinematographer, covered in leeches of water. She's right in there. We didn't have, fancy equipment. We didn't have tracks. We didn't have cranes. We didn't have anything. We didn't have helicopters. We worked with a little ProRes drone that was a professional one. And what is amazing is that when you're standing on that country, you feel the ancientness and the beauty of it, but you can't see it unless you're way above it.
Yeah.
So a lot of what people go, oh my goodness, that's extraordinary. Thank you, drones.
Yeah.
Because not in a million years could we have ever have afforded to do that if we didn't have that kind of technology. So, that in terms of how we did it, well, I guess Bonnie and I both have an eye, but we also were very strict. Also I wanted it to be slow motion, but not obviously so. So, the rate that it was shot at, and that it had to all match as well. So, yeah.
Definitely. Now, Philippa, as you said, this is a love story for country. It is also a love story between Archie and Ruby. Going back all those years, what was it like working with Archie and Ruby? Because they seem such beautiful souls.
Oh, look, they're very inspiring. I mean, sometimes I've seen the film 700 times. Sometimes it still catches me. I'll cry because I'm so moved by them. It's not about the film, it's by them. And that was my starting point. I felt that my job as director was to serve them and their stories, and really, I didn't work with them closely because we were shooting and they were concentrating on their music. And really, they barely recognized us. Alan Collins, who shot the concert material, he's a First Nations cinematographer. He'd worked with Ivan Sen on Beneath Clouds. Bonnie had actually been his focus puller, way back when she was starting. So Alan had a very close relationship, and you can see that they trusted Alan, and there was an intimacy. Like, Alan could get close in a way that I don't think any of us could have in the
Yep.
same way. But I think that, I mean, look, my joy was that I had all this footage and I got to know them in a way through that footage. And there's a lot of it that isn't in the film because, of course, you know, I could have made 3 different films from what I had, but I got to know them. And I think the real surprise and revelation was Ruby, because she's such a powerful, funny, witty, talented, clever, you know, great woman. And I was very inspired by her.
Definitely. Philippa, how many hours of footage did you have to go through as well? Because you mentioned that a lot of it was on DV. How difficult was that to go through all of that footage and pick what you wanted to include in the documentary?
Look, you know, I had no money. I didn't get paid for 18 months, so, you know, I'm still catching up from that. It was pretty difficult. But I did everything. So, you know, quite often directors have editors they work with from the beginning and they log rushes. I logged all the rushes and I did everything until the editor turned up and I'd raised money to pay one. So I guess, was it difficult? No, it wasn't hard in the sense that I think I'd spent months logging it and I knew every single frame and every single note. So by the time I got to, you know, putting together a rough cut, it was kind of in me. I knew it, and I knew what I wanted to make, and I knew what I needed to make. I knew what I needed to choose. There's stuff that's not in the film that still I could have made. I mean, I've said this, but I could have made a film about Ruby and her connection to close the memory, you know, which is amazing. But, you know, I just knew that I had to put that aside. So, look, it was difficult. I also had to leave out 4 or 5 songs from the concert because, you know, the film is 90 minutes, and I felt like because of the pace, asking an audience to sit through another hour or 45 minutes was too much of an ask.
Yeah.
But I have actually, I'm trying to do the soundtrack with all the songs, and I did work with the genius Sam Petty, who's an extraordinary sound designer, and did amazing things with the sound and their voices. So, you know, there's things that I wasn't able to include, but I've saved them for other things.
That was actually my next question. Please tell me that there's going to be a soundtrack for this, because I would love to have a copy of it in my collection.
Okay, well, could you please make a noise about that? Because, you know, we got knocked back recently on a soundtrack, and I felt like going, are you insane? But I'm just going to keep going. We'll find a way of getting it out there, because there is a CD. Jill Shelton, Archie's manager, he's performing at the Port Fairy Folk Festival on March 11, and the film will be screening there. And Jill has put together songs that we gave her from the concert. That's a Ruby Hunter back catalogue, but it's CD. But the one that we're trying to do for the film, the full soundtrack of the film, is 14 songs. Yep. And it also has some of the dialogue and some of the sounds of country. So that's great. And look, this Saturday we have a screening at the Nova at 10 to 4, and Emma Donovan and I are in conversation. So we can go into a lot more detail at that conversation.
Definitely, and I will make a big noise about that soundtrack, because I think it's an absolute crime not to have a soundtrack for this film.
Well, please do, because the other thing is, the reason I also did the soundtrack was that their stories and their songs are immortalized. Because if you don't see the film, you know, of course I want everyone to see the film, but it's a very important, I mean, look, people say it's a cultural document, and I say, look, I didn't make it as a cultural document, but their music and their songs are a very important cultural document, as well as being an absolutely amazing musical experience. So it's important, you know, it's an important part of our culture.
Definitely. Well, Philippa, I know we are running out of time very, very quickly. So to close off, I would love to give you the opportunity to tell our listeners, what would you like to say to them before they go along to check out this beautiful, beautiful film?
I'd like you to be open. Just go in there, be open, just let it wash over you. Don't go in with no expectations. That is, I think that I'm really thrilled that people love and rave about the film, but I also think that the flip side to that is that people start, thinking, is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? I just would really love people. I mean, the thing that I learned from working with this footage and making this film about Archie and Ruby, they taught me how to listen. And that was a big guiding principle on how I made the film. And I thought, my God, I never shut up. Like, we talk. And we don't listen to First Nations people. Well, I mean, we've got a history of not doing it. But there is a whole spiritual, beautiful dimension to the way they work, which is about listening. And I suppose be open and listen. That's all I ask.
Definitely. Well, Philippa, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. It's been an honour having you on the show, and thank you again for making such an important film as well.
Oh, look, it's just been such a pleasure, and thank you for asking such great questions and for wanting the soundtrack.